Okay, well, my name is Katie Godfrey-Dummer. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks to those of you who have joined us. I know that there are a few more people that are going to be joining, but this will be recorded, so it can be viewed in full on our website sometime by the end of today. So thank you for joining us to learn more about the Rural Entrepreneurial Venture, or REV program. I just want to give everybody a brief overview of where the chat box is. If you haven't joined us on Zoom before, if you just scroll to the bottom of your screen, right in the middle there's a chat box. We have about 25 people joining us today from communities across our 20 county region. And if you wouldn't mind just kind of popping into the chat box where you're from, that would be great. And while you're doing that, I'll just keep talking. So we are going to be starting with an introduction to what REV is, which will take about 10 minutes, and then we'll be speaking with panelists who participated in our first REV cohort about their takeaways from the program. And we're going to end with a question and answer period. You can ask questions in the chat box at any time, but we'll hold all questions from the end until the end. And I see people putting into the chat box. So we have people from Cannon Falls, the city of Hanska, city of Le Sueur, Lanesboro, any other communities out there? All right, well, we're gonna hold on to any questions until the end. And with that, I'd like to introduce Pam Bishop. She's our Vice President of Economic Development with Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation.
Thank you, Katie. Well, welcome everyone to the Rural Entrepreneur Venture Jumpstart Your Community Learning webinar. We're so pleased that you have joined us today. I am Pam Bishop with the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation. I've been with the organization for 14 years now. We've invested over $114 million in our region since 1986, and we serve as a regional collaborator, investing about $5 million annually in our programs, our loans, and our grant making. Imagine what it would look like if your community started thinking more like an entrepreneur. Because we know entrepreneurs are innovative, they're flexible, they're persistent, and when given the right resources, are able to execute. And that's why we're so excited to bring you what we like to call REV, because we believe it's a transformational approach based on an asset-based community development philosophy that will help us change and think about our long-term vision for a system-based approach on how we engage entrepreneurs and how we engage our communities. This program is committed to our smallest towns in southern Minnesota, and it's based on a proven economic development model called Entrepreneurial Ecosystems, hosted by Network Kansas, formerly the Center for Rural Entrepreneurship, based in Lincoln, Nebraska. Our co-founder, Don Mackey, says every community must find its own answers based on its assets and preferences. And this REV framework or roadmap enables optimal solutions to be realized. What's so exciting about this program is that it's unique for every community that chooses to join this process. Every community has an opportunity to use its assets to support what we like to call your grow your own philosophy. You know, about 70% of all businesses are developed from our backyards, from our kitchens, from our basements, from our garages. And so this program really focuses on bringing to life those entrepreneurs who are already living in our communities. And we believe this approach can transform your economic development strategies for years to come. We're focusing on towns 5,000 in population or less. And why are we doing that? Because we really believe that small towns have a culture worth preserving. We believe there's a need for resiliency to help build up the economic platform and industry sector of our small towns. And we truly believe that small towns have an entrepreneurial spirit unique to themselves. And we also know that demographics are changing, which present real new opportunities. You know, broadband allows us to do business anywhere, and people are choosing small towns to live in and to work in, including our millennials, people who are choosing a quality of life in small towns. And we know that our demographics are changing. We have new people moving into our communities and choosing to move into our small communities. So our rural towns are really poised for economic growth. And we believe that the REV program can help you move it along. Our goal is to help you build a prosperous future that focuses on entrepreneurship. Communities, the 6 communities that have been in this program for the past 3 years, have been able to build processes to nurture innovation. They've been able to grow the capacity of its people. Imagine getting more people engaged in economic development besides the people who are paid to do that every day. And imagine organizing your community resources so that they're specifically helping those entrepreneurs that you have conversations with. So this is really about a transformational change of how we think about how we do economic development. It's not transactional. It's not about creating an event or a one-off. It's about approaching this from a systems-based and process approach with an entrepreneur top of mind. It helps us to learn from each other. It helps us to grow our own companies from the landscape that is already presented to us. It helps us build long-term investment. And it is a proven model. The Center for Rural Entrepreneurship has been delivering this program for several decades now and has changed the course and the development of leaders to build a real sustainable process to economic development prosperity. I really like this roadmap because it really helps you visually see how all the elements of REV can support each other. Right now, for those of you joining the webinar, you're in the readiness category. Hopefully you're thinking about making an application into the program. And as we review those applications, we'll be looking at, is this community ready? Do they suggest to us that they're energized and they really truly want to support entrepreneurs? Those 3 communities that are accepted in early next year will get organized for action, and we'll help you develop a strategy based on assessments and work that you'll be doing. You'll be talking about your passion points and your pain points. You'll be looking at a development opportunity profile that helps you look at your historical success as well as future success. You'll be identifying stakeholders to help you develop this entrepreneurial system that will be based on customized technical assistance. You'll be doing interviews with your entrepreneurs. You'll be learning about what their needs are, and then you'll be doing some resource connections, developing those resources to help those entrepreneurs be successful. And when you develop that system and those conversations, you start developing more deal flow. In other words, you're matching what the needs of the entrepreneurs are. You're finding those resources to help them along, and you're going to start making investments, and that leads to real economic development impact, both on the short term and long term. And all of this is guided through coach. In REV, each community gets their own facilitated coach, the coach that holds your hand, pushes you along when needed, and is with you for the entire 3 years. Alongside myself, Alyssa from the foundation, a lot of you know her, as well as Linda Wallace, who's with the Region 9 Development Commission, and Jennifer Hawkins with the University of Minnesota. The 4 of us have been coaches to help the 6 communities in the past 3 years, and we're looking forward to how we can support the next 3 communities. The community prosperity model is designed to increase the prosperity for long-term growth. And that happens because we start increasing the entrepreneurial behavior. We start thinking and changing about how we look at entrepreneurs in our communities. And when we start working with them and bringing to life their new startup company or helping them to expand, you'll start to see an increased competitiveness landscape. You'll start diversifying who's doing this work in economic development. That'll add some real value to your economy. It will provide you some resiliency for those bad times when something tragic might happen or for unfortunate reasons a company might go out of business. You're not leaning upon 1 or 2 companies to support your economy. You're increasing that resiliency, which leads to more prosperity. And at the end of the day, it's about the opportunity of community development philanthropy. We would like to see more reinvestment back into your community. So this type of model never goes away. REV communities will see an increase in diversity of businesses. They'll see more entrepreneurs engaged, and they'll truly see more economic growth and prosperity. I love this example. Spring Grove is one of our 6 REV communities, and Courtney took the time one day to kind of do some mind mapping, some soul searching of how REV was making an impact in a variety of ways that they were doing this work. And at the top of the page, you'll see that she started sorting through all the working groups that were important to the REV roadmap, from their Chamber Commercial Club to their Southeast Minnesota Futures, Driftless Grown, and their Economic Development Authority. With that, she started creating some themes. What are we noticing that's happening that will truly help us build some solid focus to our economic development strategy? Regional food focus became really a highlight of their work. And entrepreneurships, including, the artisan culture, rose to the top. And then they started thinking, wonder if we reimagined our community based on the working groups we have, the themes and the assets. We could start developing some gathering spaces, a welcome center, a performing art venue, a co-working space, a commercial kitchen, and maybe even a community foundation. So all of this has created real excitement for our REV communities. And what are we asking of you? So if you're thinking about becoming a REV community, we ask you to truly commit to 3 years. It does take 3 years to get through this process successfully. We're asking you to identify a 5 to 7 person champion leadership team that is held together by a community coordinator. That community coordinator becomes the glue to support the efforts with the coach. There's going to be frequent meetings and more frequent early on because it takes some time to get things going and ramped up. We'll be asking you for some goal setting each year. We're going to be asking you for some work around assessments and some benchmarking. But most of all, we're going to have fun. This is a fun process. And what you're going to uncover and discover is going to be enlightening. And what are some additional benefits? We talk about system change. And so what are some of the real system change that we've seen in the last 3 years? What's interesting is none of our 6 communities, for the most part, had a data collection system going in. We've been able to introduce the SourceLink Pro program platform, which originated out of Kansas City. And this platform has allowed them to enter their data from all their survey work, has been able to streamline event processes. It's been able them to make reports and print off reports for their board. They've been able to track information, unlike the prior to the REV program. We've also helped them build intentional business surveys. So surveys that allow them to go in and allow anyone really in the community that has an interest in doing this to go into a company and start gathering information to really get to know what the real needs of that company might be. We've supported ongoing trainings. We've helped them identify community champions. And through the rural effect mapping process, which was another resource and tool, we've been able to see an elevation of both community engagement as well as entrepreneurs. What's also exciting is quarterly we gather together, and when we were able to gather together in person, we would come to the foundation here. All 6 communities would meet quarterly to share their experiences, to talk about their challenges and to celebrate their accomplishments. We'd also try to bring a speaker in to help bring more knowledge and insight into the work that they were doing. And of course, we celebrated. We like to have fun. Our first year was a celebration in and of itself. And each year we celebrate our accomplishments together. And this is pretty typical in a REV community. You'll start seeing more people engaged, more people having conversations, more people connecting, and truly trying to rally around how everyone can be helpful in building that culture of entrepreneurship. So if you're one of those communities with us today that's seriously thinking about an application, what are we looking for? As I mentioned earlier, we're looking for energetic, dedicated teams that can excite each other, the ability to gain community buy-in. We're looking for strong commitment to leadership and collaboration. And we're looking for diversity. We know that demographics are changing in our communities, and so we're hoping that you'll be able to bring together a diverse group of people and a desire to leave a legacy. This is something that takes time, but with time, results will happen. You must be a 501c3 organization. If you're not, we'd encourage you to find a fiscal agent who can support this work. We're looking for communities with populations of 5,000 or under, and you must be located in our 20-county region. The application deadline and timeline. September 1 is our deadline for applications. We expect to make site visits then to qualified communities probably towards the end of September into early October. Early November, we'll make the announcement of our 3 REV communities, and we plan to kick off those REV towns in early January. So with that, we're going to transition now into have our panelists speak about their experience, and I think you're going to find this very, very insightful. Courtney Burgee Swanson is with the Community Economic Development Associates and leads the economic development arm in Spring Grove and is one of our REV communities. Another REV community is in Lanesboro. Rebecca Charles leads that, and she's also with CETA. Samantha DiMaggio, Community Development Director with LeSueur, another REV community. Chris Hahn is with CETA, Spring Valley, another great REV community. Jennifer Hawkins is one of our coaches, and she's with the University of Minnesota Extension. She is coaching the Lanesboro and Spring Valley communities. And Mary Kennedy is with Blue Earth, a REV community as well, and she's the city administrator there. So the question I have for all of you today, are you ready to jumpstart your community? We certainly hope you are. And so with that, we're going to jump right in to our panel presenters. Welcome all of you. So we're going to jump right in. And again, I'll be looking on the chat too. So please send your questions along the way, because we certainly want to make sure we cover all the questions that you might have, or just even some general comments. And I'll just say, even after today's webinar, if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to send me an email or shoot me a phone call. We'll be happy to chat further. So Mary, I'm going to start with you. Mary is our Blue Earth representative, done great work in Blue Earth. What is your greatest benefit that your community of Blue Earth has seen as a result of REV?
Hi, Pam. Wow, that is a hard question to answer, just because there have been so many benefits that our community has seen and experienced as over the past 3 years, being a part of REV and being a part of this cohort and a part of this experience. But I think one of the greatest benefits that we have experienced and seen is probably engaging, having an engaged network of support system to work and engage with our entrepreneurs, and having the tools to have the conversations would be our greatest benefit that I can speak to right now.
Thank you, Mary. Courtney and Chris, I'm going to both throw this question at you. We're going to start with Courtney, ladies first, right? How has this framework changed your economic strategy to create jobs and prosperity?
Thank you, Pam. Yeah, and hi, everyone. As I was thinking about REV, it's kind of an interesting mix of like left brain and right brain, of being, organized and just learning more about the actual data. That was one of the biggest benefits that we saw, is just having the tools to get organized, of knowing like how many businesses are even in our community. Do we have an email list of everyone who we need to reach? What is the data telling us about the market in Spring Grove, and what are the opportunities for entrepreneurs? So that's kind of more of like the administrative data, background, accountability. And then there's also this kind of like creative component of, just dreaming for the future and engaging diverse stakeholders and having community meetings and just trying to think through how we can make it be organized ourselves as the Economic Development Authority or as a community, but as also kind of give some opportunities for thinking about the future. So what does quality of life look like? And how do we make the community a good place to live first, so that we know that more people would want to be attracted to start a business there. So just kind of an interesting, it's been a really great way to kind of reorient the community and ground them in both of those kind of balance, I guess.
Thank you, Courtney. Chris.
Good morning, everybody. You know, I love the graphic that you put up earlier that Courtney did, because we had an example of that in the last couple of weeks. You know, one of the things it's done for us is it's really helped us identify all the multiple stakeholders you have in your community. When you talk about engaging people's passions and you talk about gearing up and ramping up the community. In Spring Valley, we did a co-working survey. We sent it out with utility bills, and response rate was about maybe 11%. And you know, the people that wanted, I think we had 28 people that said they'd be interested or maybe, which isn't very much. However, I had 3 business owners in Spring Valley approach me, and they all said, well, hey, we have space. And I'm thinking, great, now we have 3 businesses competing for space. But the great thing was that wasn't the case at all. They said, if we can develop some kind of flyer, all 3 of us will pound the pavement and we'll go out and really investigate this and see what we can put together. So I think that's a great example of like using what Courtney did with identifying where your different groups are and how they interact with your community, and then providing the vehicle for them to connect, network, and do these types of things. So like I said, I love that graphic. That was really, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what happens. So
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Chris. I think, you know, one of the great things about the program, while there are some tools and resources that we encourage every community to use as part of the framework, every community can be innovative, right? Not only do we want to find innovative entrepreneurs, but the community can also be innovative, and they can start testing the water and, you know, learning as we're doing. And that's part of the fun about this framework. And I'm going to go back to you, Mary, because I know early on, I love the story that you shared early on about all these companies you suddenly found. You want to share a little bit about how you did that?
Sure. One of the first activities, and I'm just going to put this out there right now because it's something I've said many times, for any of the next communities that will be lucky enough to be a part of this experience. Pam is going to have you do lots of activities or lots of things, and you're going to question why. You're going to not like some of them. Do them anyways and do them wholeheartedly, and you will reap the benefits. But one of those activities that we had to do was make a list of all of the businesses in the community. And so I was pulling lists from our Chamber of Commerce, from Google, from the phone books. And all of a sudden we had a list of nearly 300 businesses in our town of just over 3,000 people. And I'm like, where are all of these businesses? You know, this cannot be true. I was a new economic developer to the city at the time, and we actually got in a car, me and the chamber director at the time, and drove around finding these businesses because we were like, there's no way that there are, you know, this many businesses in this town. There's just not be true. It is true, and so I think it's just exciting. And even if you've been in your community forever, the chamber director at the time had been. She's from here. She graduated high school here and didn't know that all of these businesses existed. We had to get in the car and drive around to find them.
It's a great story, and we were just blown away when Mary talked about this work. And so doing some of this entrepreneurial mapping will be one of the first things that every community gets to do. And I think you discovered a lot. So thanks for sharing that story. So Sam, you're over in LeSueur, great town of LeSueur, and I know that you know, you guys have experienced some great outcomes of the REV framework. REV pushed you guys to think about things that maybe you hadn't thought of before. So I'm curious to know, you know, what exists today in LeSueur that perhaps didn't exist prior to REV?
Well, one of the great things that we started doing was the surveys that you were talking about. And it was interesting to us to see some of the data that came along with those surveys. So since we've been doing this work, we've been learning more about our businesses and the demographics of our businesses. And one of the businesses said to me, well, why do you care how old I am and how many kids I have? But I explained to them, we're trying to find out, do you have someone who's going to take over your business? Are you going to pass it down to a child? Are you going to potentially sell your business? Who could take it over if something happened to you? And so we use that data to help build some programs that we didn't have before. We built a facade program. We built a revolving loan fund program. We've used that data to apply to DEED for their redevelopment grant program. And so we've gotten tons of great data that we've now been able to actually kind of back up our story with, and to the people that make these decisions. That's one of the questions that they're all going to ask you. How do you know that this is what you need? And now we actually have data. And that's something my community didn't have before. We were kind of throwing darts in the night, and now we actually know these are areas and these could be future concerns for us. So we're trying to address those now. But it's been great for us to actually have real life data.
Great. Thank you, Sam. And Courtney, you know, we showed off that mind mapping sketch. I know when you first showed it to me, you said, oh, this is just scribble, you know, and I said, oh, I love it. You know, this is like the heart and soul of what you're doing, and to take the time like you did to do the mind mapping to figure out how does everything connect. To me, it was just a wonderful demonstration of how REV is helping you think in much greater ways, and to help you broaden this work so that there is more community engagement and ownership of how this will happen. So what are some of the things that, you know, exist today over in Spring Grove that perhaps weren't there 3 years ago?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of things that started, I think, as seedlings. You know, I've been joking around as calling REV kind of like the permission giver of, you know, we have all of these ideas, all of us do. Every person who works in a community has these ideas of, you know, dreaming about what if we did this or what if we did this. But sometimes, like, when the rubber hits the road, you just don't have the time and resources or the accountability to do it. So one of the cool things that happened in Spring Grove with the REV program is that we have, you know, our core team, the REV core team. Each of those individuals kind of got a thing in their own head about what this could be. So that has spun off into a lot of different kind of spokes. So for example, there was someone on the core team who really wanted to make sure that we started a chamber of commerce, because in Spring Grove, we didn't have a chamber of commerce before. So we officially applied for our 501c6 paperwork last year, and are waiting to hear back on that. So a new chamber of commerce. The EDA decided to use some of the data that we had been given to jumpstart more of a comp planning process. So we invested in a housing study that then led to the creation of a housing committee. And another cool spin-off of that was actually a Habitat for Humanity project, where we had a local alumni architectural designer come into the classroom to work with some high schoolers to design a Norwegian American home that then Habitat for Humanity built. So, you know, housing became a part of it. We started a kind of an informal entrepreneur coffee date program where we just meet up at the coffee shop, or we did before COVID, and we will be resuming that, just to kind of have no agenda, but just to say, what's going on? You know, what are some ideas that we have? So there's a lot of kind of little things like that, and like I said, it's those people who were initially engaged, saw the opportunities, and created their own little paths. And so now we have all of these really interesting kind of cogs that are all working together because of kind of those conversations that were started.
Thank you, Courtney. Now we're going to jump in. I know we mentioned tools and processes, and, you know, we try to bring a whole host of resources to our REV communities. And some will have more meaning to some communities than others. And you know, Jennifer will probably attest, there's lots of tools and resources we can use through REV. We have a library, which is wonderful. It's wonderful to be connected to that. But I know for some of you, you've had some favorites, and some of you have, really jumped in and soared with some of the resources. And some of you, like Rebecca, you've been so willing to help other communities get familiar with what I know is your favorite tool. So I'm going to let you talk about that a little bit.
All right, so my favorite tool, and hopefully will be yours, is SourceLink. SourceLink is an online database that you get to utilize with the REV program, and it can be used for everything from just holding information about your local businesses to creating invitations, creating and distributing surveys. You can even create reports from the data that comes back in. You can send out bulk emails, tag businesses, and individuals so that you can target specific audiences or a specific contact list. So it offers so many different options for you. You can also look up your lists based on certain criteria, whether it's businesses that started in a certain year, a certain time span. If you want to look at only female-owned businesses or only veteran-owned businesses, you have all of those different options around for you. You just have to fill it in once, and it takes a little bit that very first time you fill it, but after that, it even has a speedy way to be able to just upload all of your data all at once. So it's a really fantastic a resource that you can use in limitless amounts of ways.
Thank you. And I think what's also interesting is that most of you started out right out of the gate using this, or at least getting familiar with the tool. And now 3 years into it, I don't think any one of you would give up the tool. If I'm looking at all of you, and I'm not seeing anyone disagree with me. So it's always exciting when we can find a resource that's common among all the REV communities and that you have found invaluable in your work. And so that's certainly a commitment from the foundation as we move into the next 3 communities. We certainly want them to be as passionate about what SourceLink has brought to all of you. And so Chris, in Spring Valley, we know that you're also doing a great work there. I'm curious to know if you've had any favorite tools that you want to talk about.
I really do like the SourceLink just because it's something, I've worked with a lot of different databases in the past, and it's just something we're kind of basic users right now, but it helps me organize. It helps me, and I'll give an example with childcare. We did some micro grants in Spring Valley with childcare, but I used SourceLink to identify the childcare providers once we had them and go in there, and now I have a working group. So if I want to send out information from SMIF on grants that are coming or childcare grants coming from the state of Minnesota, I have that quick resource. I can edit it if I need to, or I add people or whatever. But I have that tool there so hey, there's an update on childcare grants or funding for in-home childcare. Perfect. Send the information out using that. So yeah, it takes some getting used to, but once you get used to it, it's a very handy tool. And that's actually a real world example of how I've used it. So.
And Mary, I didn't mean to overlook you. What were some of your favorite tools? I know you have a few.
Yeah, that's okay. One of my favorites was the Ripple map that we did with Scott from the U of M. The Ripple map was, I guess, if you don't know what that is, it's kind of a process for evaluating group-focused efforts. And really what we got from that and what our map looks like, each of our communities got to do it, was kind of a computerized version of what Courtney's graphic looked like. And we ended up taking that and it's hanging up in our council chambers right now. We distributed it throughout our community, and it was really a nice visual that everybody got to see from that exercise, and we've revisited it several times since we did that exercise, and so that's been really helpful. That was one of my favorites. And then another tool that I don't think we talk enough about is just our coaches. Alyssa, our coach, has been a huge resource, and that's been one of my favorite tools. So.
Great, thanks, Mary. Yeah, we should mention the ripple effect mapping would not have happened without the resources of the University of Minnesota Extension Service. So Jennifer has brought some additional resources based on what they have in her world. And so it truly is, you know, a collaboration where, you know, as we learn and do our work here through REV, we're able to include additional resources that might not be part of the original REV framework. And so, you know, I truly enjoy that too. I thought it was very insightful to see how entrepreneurial activity is changing over the course of the 3 years, and how this work is becoming much deeper based on the conversations that the REM work brings to life. So Rebecca, we're going to jump back to you for a moment. You know, this is a pilot program, and so that we've not done this before, and you know, you learn as you go, and as communities we learn. What have you learned over the last 3 years that you might have done differently, given what you know now?
Well, first, just so everybody knows, I only joined the Lanesboro team 1 year ago. So I, first of all, would have joined sooner. But gaining a seat of representative was actually one of the biggest goals for the Lanesboro team. So it did, the program did exactly what it was supposed to, getting me in when it did. But I think what I would say is that I would have not made any judgments on different resources or programs, kind of like what Mary said about sometimes you just don't understand why you're being asked to do something. For Ripple mapping, for her, it was a great, you know, tool. For me, it was as well, but I was so skeptical in the beginning. But now I have 2 of them actually on the wall right behind me. So they're a fantastic resource. So I would say just kind of trust the process and let it happen, because it really does pay off in the end.
Thanks, Rebecca. Chris, what would you do differently if you could go back?
Well, again, full disclosure, I've only been on that program for just over a year now in Spring Valley. But one of the things I think that comes out too is when you talk about energizing your community on the front end of it, if you're interested in this, talk to people, ask them if they want to be involved, ask what their passions are, because if you can engage those passions and give people an outlet to activate them within the community, you're going to have a lot better response. And part of it is surveys have shown that a lot of times people don't volunteer simply because they weren't asked to. If you can find something that someone's passionate about, and that was a good lesson or a good reminder for me again with this co-working space. You know, we had 3 people that were like, they believe in it and they're going to go find out what's going on and they're going to get some really good data. But yeah, energize the community, find out what people's strengths and passions are, and then ask them how they want to be involved. So, I mean, not that that doesn't happen anyway, but I would put a greater focus on that probably.
Great. And it's never too late to do that. And as we're learning. So, you know, Courtney, one of the things that we are hopeful will happen as the result of the end of the 3 years is that there's a sustainability plan. Every community that's in REV is asked to have a sustainability plan, kind of a guide as to how this work will live on. Curious to know, Courtney, how will REV live on in Spring Grove?
In Spring Grove, I think REV will live on through a lot of those spokes that I had mentioned. You know, creating the chamber, creating a whole new business development entity that's focused on helping entrepreneurs and focused on telling positive stories about the community. You know, we like to joke that we're so busy doing cool things that we forget to tell people about it. So that's a huge thing for a lot of small towns, is just really taking advantage of their identity and their assets and moving that forward. So definitely through that entity, we just created another new kind of task force called Spring Grove 2030 that is looking at a number of different things, all kind of related to the REV framework. You know, how do we develop more community philanthropy and potentially develop a community foundation? How do we look at gaining more local developers or regional developers to invest in real estate and put their money into town? What does the future of work look like? We are lucky to have fiber internet to the community, but how can we look for other ways to partner with our communications company or our city to make sure that we're attracting people. So it's, I think, through the EDA, through Spring Grove 2030, through the chamber, they've all kind of taken the ball and run with it. So we have work plans, we have goals, we are organized. And so we're excited to kind of see where all of these things go. And I guess I should just mention too that the evolution of that has been all part of the process. Like, I don't think we would have imagined that that's what the end goal would look like once our tenure was up, but these things have kind of organically developed. And I think that's the best way to go about it, because forcing any one thing on one community or copying what another community did for your community is never going to work, right? You have to use your own assets. So that's kind of how I see REV, living on in Spring Grove and all of our communities.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. Mary, I'm going to pop back over to you. How do you expect REV to live on in the Blue Earth community?
So REV has done a couple really big things in our community. So I guess to kind of explain, REV has shown our community that there's a really big need for succession planning. And it also showed our community that we need to engage with our student population and connect them with workforce education opportunities. So that whole piece, that whole second piece, actually created a whole second initiative through REV, and we got a workforce coordinator hired. There was a whole nother piece kind of REV in Blue Earth. I have kind of said over the past year that REV has to live on in Blue Earth. If it were to go away, everybody would wonder why. There is kind of just a whole new way of thinking about economic development and entrepreneur development in our community. So for it to go away is just not an option. People know the word REV, they know the people who are involved in this work. And so I guess kind of our sustainability plan would be for the organized core group to establish themselves as more of a formal subcommittee of our Economic Development Authority. We have received some grant fundings, and we have expanded our staff capacity. So it just makes sense for our funding to be held through the EDA and to more so become formalized, I guess, so that when new people come in or people move on, it all can continue the way it should, and that we can continue to raise funds and work with people and keep things moving forward. And it just has to live on. It just will. It just can't. There's no other option, I guess.
I don't think you're going to ever let it go. That's great. You have a plan. Yeah, a great plan. So thank you. And Sam, I'm curious, over in LeSueur, you've been with the program all 3 years, and I'm curious to know how this program has changed the culture of your town. Share some stories if you can.
Yeah, for sure. I think our city has been, and the businesses have been really more open to helping other entrepreneurs. And I know this is also a time with COVID right now, but really trying to figure out how can we help businesses get going and keep going and stay going and supporting each other and working together. I've seen businesses partner now on different initiatives, and these are businesses that were never really talking before. But after I started getting them together and they started meeting with each other and kind of realizing, like, I'm not alone in this. And I think that's one of the biggest issues that some of these small business owners have, is they kind of feel alone. And now that they've realized, I can reach out to my friend, we can hold events together. One of the things that they got together and did is they started a poker run in town, which I thought was awesome. It was something that I didn't even really have to partake in, but all these businesses were working together. And I think that's my end goal is you and I kind of joked, I won't be here forever. And I know that, and LeSueur knows that, but I want to make sure that I'm creating systems that will be here. And that's what the whole process is about. It's not about me. It's about making sure that I have the data and the systems and everything in place that people need to move forward. And that's always, I think, our biggest challenge as economic developers is, I like to talk about me. It's all about me, but really in the end, it's about how do we create a sustainability plan or some type of system that moves forward even beyond us. And that's what I'm trying to do. And I think that's what my community is working on, trying to figure out how can they partner together and work together to create these relationships that will help move their business forward.
Great comments. I know for some of you, letting go of your coach or knowing that your coach his term is the so-called ending at the end of the calendar year is a hard one to swallow. As you all know, though, we're not letting you go away. You get to be alum of this program. So rest assured, starting in January, you will still stay connected as 6 communities that entered the REV program together. We're hopeful that you'll serve as mentors to our next 3 communities, and that will continue just to build the cohort of communities that have chosen to be part of this process. So your coach will not go away. I mean, theoretically, she will still be around. And Jennifer Hawkins is one of those great coaches that has taken the leadership role in coaching 2 communities, Spring Valley and Lanesboro. And Jennifer, you've been patiently waiting to participate in this panel discussion. And so from a coach's perspective, you know, you've been in the trenches with these folks from day one. You know, what would you truly recommend to communities who are considering making an application into the program?
Thanks, Pam. Yeah, I mean, it's been so fun for me to hear the reflections of the communities and to start to see some questions come in from the participants. But I think as you think about applying for the program, kind of really digging in and understanding that it is about systems change and that it is almost like this, it takes a village to support to raise a local economy or support a local economy. I think it's a little bit different than your typical economic development program in those 2 senses. And so as you think about how you might organize to apply for a REV opportunity, think about who would be part of your core team and think broadly about who some of those members might be. Maybe it's not your typical suspects. You know, think beyond the usual suspects who get involved in a lot of things. Think about different sectors, different roles. Maybe think about some entrepreneurs in the community that are emerging leaders that could really bring some insights into the way your community approaches supporting entrepreneurs. I think it's, you know, I think Sam brought this up, a couple of the other folks did as well, but, you know, you will want to have someone who is a champion, the organizer, but they're not going to be doing it alone. And you will want their organization, the applicant organization, to, I would say, endorse, but not just endorse, really have them thinking about this as a core opportunity for their organization to support entrepreneurs too. So it's not just we're checking a box, yes, we approve, you can do this, but that the organization itself has an understanding of what the commitment is and is really bought into devoting time and energy to the effort over the coming years. I think the other thing to think about, and Pam mentioned this early on in terms of the application, is thinking about the community's readiness and how have some of your past experiences in organizing for community and economic development or other initiatives, how have those gone, and how can you articulate for the review committee that capacity exists to organize for change and for development in your community. What does that look like, and how could it be used for this particular program or goal of developing your economy through supporting entrepreneurs? So yeah, those are a couple of reflections, I guess. And I don't know that I added anything new, but maybe reinforced a couple of points that were already brought up earlier in the conversation.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good, wise comments. Chris, I know you haven't been in the program for a long time, but do you have any suggestions on what folks should be thinking about?
I would just look at really, Jennifer hit it right on the head, leverage some of those people that may not be your usual suspects. And the other thing I would say is, is you ramp up the community, invite the existing organizations, invite your chamber, invite your EDA, invite, you know, the city council, and say, hey, here's an opportunity, but it's going to work if we do it collaboratively, because you have to have all those different people working together towards a common goal. And we talk a lot about mission and vision, but it is important, I think. And I think it's important, as I think Mary alluded to too, it's not going to go away, but it's also not a short-term fix. It's a long-term goal that we're trying to improve. So it's a sustainable long-term outcome. And I think that would just be my, you know, my thoughts on this. Try to involve as many different existing organizations as you can, and then see what their strengths are. See where it is part of like the map that Courtney did, what organizations fit the different missions and goals that you have. So I think that's really important to get as much buy-in as you can and find out, you know, all the stakeholders that you have and build it from there. It's going to be better. The more diverse the program, the greater the outcome potential. So.
Great, thank you, Chris. So we do have a question that has come in from Colleen. For towns that have gone through the REV program already, would the program look different for them? Or does it not make sense for these towns to apply again? So in other words, I think Colleen is asking, if you went through the program again, would it look different? I think some of you commented, if you had an opportunity to do it over again, what would you do differently? Any reaction to Colleen's questions?
I think one thing that I would do differently is I think I was almost afraid to ask people for help. I was fairly new in town and afraid to ask other people to help me. But that's one thing that I've said repeatedly, is you really have to build that capacity. And, you know, as Chris said, people want to help you. They just need to know that you need that help. And I think that's one thing that I would have done differently from the get-go, is not be as afraid, you know, maybe even reached out to the newspaper saying, hey, we put out a press release, but really being open and saying, I need people to help me, so please message me. And I think I would have met more people, or really helped build that capacity a little differently. My EDA has been great. They've been my core team, but I think I need it to be bigger beyond that, and not be afraid to ask for help. That's what I would do differently.
If I could say something, I would, if I could do something differently, I would have let go of control sooner. I think you tend to want to, and I think that was probably part of my having a hard time with some of the exercises and the things like that. I'm making it sound like it was horrible, and it wasn't at all. It was wanting to know outcomes and wanting to know what to expect and not being able to is hard. And once you can let go of the unknown and not knowing what you can expect, and not controlling the program, I guess, that's when everything got really fun. And so if I could have let go of trying to control it sooner, that's what I would do differently. And one recommendation I would have to anybody considering applying is have strong support from your EDA or from your city council, because you are going to be looking at making big changes to the way you do economic development. So without support from the people that support your economic development, that's going to be really hard.
Other folks on the panel? I would also reinforce what Mary has said. Some of the challenges I experienced in some of the communities that I coached was that there had not been that conversation with the EDA board in terms of their strategic planning. So I would encourage all of you who are making an application to make sure that you've had conversations about the focus of entrepreneurship. Certainly, we're not discouraging you from doing business retention or business attraction. They're all important components to that three-legged stool of economic development. but specific to REV. REV is focused on building entrepreneurs. So there needs to be some time carved out within your strategic plan that gives permission and flexibility and ability to not only the EDA person who's leading this, but to the community. It needs to really, the EDA group needs to take some leadership and really demonstrating that entrepreneurship is an important component to how you plan to build your economy. So take that time, sometime this year, if you plan to make an application, to feel confident that as an economic development professional, you're going to have the time, the ability, and the means, and be supported in this work. That would be my advice in terms of what you should be considering in your work. Well, this has been a lot of fun for me, Jennifer, too. I know for you, just to hear the panelists talk and to hear the stories. And, you know, it's hard to believe that 3 years has passed by so quickly. Oh my gosh, where'd the time go? And we're just also proud of you for the work that you've done and the achievements that you've made. And we so look forward to what will be coming out of your communities moving forward. None of these tools go away. You have the resources, and you will always have the resources as long as the foundation stays engaged in this program. We want to say special thanks to the Blandin Foundation. They've been a key funder in the past 3 years, significant in helping us have the financial means to do this work. We want to say thank you to the University of Minnesota Extension Service, not only for bringing us Jennifer, but for also bringing us the ripple effect mapping process. We also want to say thank you to Region 9 Development Commission for giving us Linda Wallace. And we want to thank all of you and your communities and your leadership for giving us you as champions of this program. So Katie, I don't know if you have any wrap-up comments that you'd like to make?
Just so everyone knows, like I said, this is being recorded, so it will be on our website later today at smifoundation.org/rev, and we'll email it out to all of the attendees as well, so be on the lookout for that.
Well, with that, I say thank you on behalf of the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation for joining our webinar this afternoon, and we look forward to receiving your applications. Have a great day, everyone.